Hello and welcome to your reliability and validity mark scheme. So let's get straight to it. First of all, you've completed question 1, A, B and C, and that was looking at the piece of research looking at sleep and mood. In question A, you would get 1 mark for making some kind of reference to a positive correlation or explaining that as one variable increases, so does the other. Okay, nice and simple. You would then get a 2nd mark for explaining it would not be appropriate because correlation only shows a relationship between 2 variables and not cause and effect. So we've already talked about this in class before. A correlation shows a relationship, there's a link between 2 variables. It doesn't show us that A causes B or B causes A, it just knows that the 2 are related because of problems with intervening variables and lots of other things. Okay. Question B, it must be contextualised. Please read through it. Can you highlight terms like mood, sleep, whatever it might be? If it's not contextualised, you don't get any marks, okay? Which hopefully by now you've started to avoid doing, fingers crossed. So mark 1, for example, and what I've done here is I've given an example. So you've got hundreds of different things that you could talk about for ethical issues: informed consent, right to withdraw, protection from harm, whichever ones you want, but you must include these 3 things to get the 2 marks. You must make sure it's contextualised, you must name it in some way, so asking for consent, informed consent, and then you need to explain that. So asking participants to sign a form if they understand the study is about sleep and mood and are happy to take part. So you've named informed consent, you've explained how you'd gain that informed consent, and you've contextualised. So if you've done all of that, you can get all of the marks. Question 1C, you get 1 mark for each one of the following. So I believe it's a explain how question, so as you know, it's a step-by-step guide. So first of all, you would explain for test retest. The same participants would complete the sleep questionnaire on more than one occasion. So if you said you'd get them to complete it once and then a week later you'd invite them back to complete it again, you get a mark for that. You would then mention that each participant's score from the first occasion would then be correlated with this 2nd time that they've completed it on a scatter graph. Okay. And that would be absolutely fine. There's a lot of detail there because it's directly from the mark scheme. But you would mention that they would repeat the questionnaire more than once, the sleep questionnaire more than once. They do it 1 week and then they do it another week. They do it at the start of the week and at the end of the week, maybe about a week apart. And then you would check the correlation by plotting their scores on a scatter graph. And then you would look for the strength of the correlation. And if you've mentioned, so the strength of the correlation is the key, but ideally what you should have mentioned is you would use a correlation coefficient, or if you remember, it's called Pearson's R, the test that we used in lesson, or Pearson's R or Spearman's Rho. They're just 2 different types of statistical tests. I wouldn't expect you to name them, but the key thing that you would mention is, and if you have, that's brilliant, you can be extra smug. The key thing you need to mention is we'd look at the strength of the correlation by using a correlation coefficient. And finally, we'd expect it to be a strong positive correlation, and as it says there, we're looking for a positive correlation, but particularly if you've mentioned strong, that's even better. So if you think by some fluke of chance the lesson then has followed exactly the step-by-step guide that you would need for the instructions. We got you to do the BuzzFeed quiz the first week, then we got you to do it the 2nd week. We then plotted your scores on a scatter graph. We then worked out the correlation to look the correlation coefficient to look at the strength of the correlation, and then finally we would expect it to be a strong positive correlation to suggest there is strong test retest reliability. And as you know, for the BuzzFeed quiz, there was not. Question 2, we've got A, C and D. So you get 1 mark. You should be absolutely fine with these now. The hypothesis should be directional because there is past research indicating the likely direction. The next question, which is question C, I didn't ask you to do question B, is that you need to show knowledge of, you need to define the term face validity. So where a behaviour or where something looks like, does the measure look like it's measuring what it claims to measure at first sight on the face of it? So any of that terminology around there that you've used, that definition, you can talk about that. On the surface, at the first look, on the face of it, at first sight, does it look like it's measuring what it claims to measure? Okay, and then from there you get 1 mark for each of these points. So if you mention that having a dog on the lead appears at first glance to be measuring considerate behaviour, so if you've made reference to the dog lead, you've made reference to at first glance or on the face of it, or it looks like, you can get the, and considerate behaviour, you get the marks. And then if you go to extend that, so you explain it a bit further, then you get the 3rd mark, because if a dog is on the lead, it's less likely or able to be able to upset other people by coming close, frightening, chasing, biting or growling at them. So you're basically there explaining why a dog being on a lead is a considerate behaviour. So if you haven't used any of that terminology or that explanation, but you've explained why it's considerate behaviour still, then you can get that 3rd mark. And then finally, question D, any 2 of these, you get 1 mark for every, for the 2, you don't get any more than 2, obviously. So you name 2 types of validity. So if you've named 2, then you get 2 marks, and if you define them correctly, then you get 2 marks as well. So concurrent, when performance on one measure correlates highly with performance on another previously validated measure. So that was where we looked at the BuzzFeed quiz and we looked at the IQ quiz. Ecological, where a measure of behaviour accurately reflects the behaviour in the real world. So ecological validity, does it represent, can it be applied to the real world? And temporal validity, where findings from the research apply to the time that we're applying them to. So can we confidently apply them to modern day if it's old research? And internal validity, can we be confident of cause and effect? So 1 mark for each term that you've defined out of the 2, and then 1 mark for each definition if you've used the definition from the booklet instead of the exact wording that's on the screen. That is fine. Thank you very much.